So let's go through the checklist. Gym membership, check. Labels checked and food purchased at the grocery store, another check. A pledge to make healthier life choices. Check that box too. And yet, eventually the results just aren't showing. The frustration is building and the drive is starting to lack. Is there a way to fix this? Find the solutions that are going to work for you, or maybe the person that actually brings it all together. There are so many directions that people can take, but sometimes maybe it's just one person that can actually be the game changer. Jonathon Dipierro is looking to be able to do just that with OPEX Ottawa. That's the topic today. So welcome to Living Your Life with Lianne Laing, the podcast brought to you by Extension Marketing. And as always, you can head to extensionmarketing.com for more information. Jonathon, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
This is interesting because I hadn't heard, and I really was. It was eye-opening when I was looking at what OPEX Ottawa is. So if do you mind, like, what is the overall view of OPEX, and how did it kind of get here to the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so what OPEX really stands for is sort of that one-stop shop where one individual is building this great relationship with their clients, and they're helping them with nutrition, with exercise, and with lifestyle. So typically in the industry right now, what you tend to see is you see all these services being offered, but it's always different people, right? You go to a nutritionist for one thing, you go to an exercise trainer for another thing. And so at OPEX Ottawa, what we try to do is really combine those things and just make sure that they're all on the same page. So as an example, if you think about someone who's doing, very hard training, you just want to make sure that their nutrition sort of supports the training that they're doing, right? And so you want to make sure that you're, for example, eating enough calories, etc., and that all those things really need to be in alignment.
Well, I guess it would be frustrating if you're trying to do one goal and you've got something that's happening with the trainer and you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to build endurance, you're trying to get to a race, you're trying to do certain things, and yet at the other end, the nutritionist or someone who's helping you with that isn't quite on board or understanding what the physical outlets have been. Like it's having that communication to have it all together.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And what I've seen in the past many times, so I've been a fitness trainer for 12 years now. So I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily like a pro, but I've been doing it long enough to have seen many different cases of many different kinds of individuals. And what I tend to see really often is sometimes those things are not really in accordance. So you have someone who's, let's say, under eating, but they're trying to do this really intense training as an example, right? And all of a sudden that is fine for maybe a couple days, but then very shortly after they're burnt out, they have no energy, they don't know what's going on, and they're having such a tough time just maintaining their normal daily activities because you're just like burning the candles at both ends, right? And so what we try to do is just make sure that our nutrition prescription reflects the kind of training that you're doing, and the lifestyle can support it. Because I think that is often one of the missing links is it's not really a sexy thing to say, hey, you really just need to sleep a little bit more, right? You can't sell it necessarily. You can't, it's not a poster that you can put on the side of a building that is very attractive. But ultimately, that's one of the things that I've seen really be able to help people over time is those lifestyle changes.
For you, what was it? Was it the passion for exercise, for fitness, for teaching, for, inspiring other people? Like I always find when I have someone sitting in this chair, right, there's always a story as to how they actually ended up there.
Yeah.
And I saw too, like you come from an immigrant family and yes. Raised in Montreal.
Yep. That's right. So my parents are both, I'm actually a first generation Italian, and my parents were both actually Canadian Italian is really the correct term. So both my parents were born in Italy, and that's, and you can imagine, so they came here and they didn't even know English when they first came here. And so I was, that first generation growing up with, Canadian values and trying to, find my own way like everyone does growing up. And so I had a, competitive hockey and soccer background growing up. But I always like to mention that those were not necessarily my choices, right? Like my parents put me in sports because that's what you do when you're a parent, right? You're like, oh, my kid should.
But if you're coming from Italy, I'm assuming the soccer was, it was almost a switch. Like you were going to do soccer and then we'll get to the Canadian hockey.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so I did, I appreciated the choices they made for me because it allowed me to be active year round, which now is fundamental to my ultimate belief of like people should move in some way, shape or form perform all the time, virtually every day. And those exercises can be harder or sometimes easier, yes, but movement is really part of our DNA, like whether you like it or not, we're built to move, and again, some way, shape or form. But from there, I would say the first time I really chose like on my own to do some kind of exercise or movement was, the first time I joined the gym. I was 16 years old. My mom had to sign for me, because I wasn't even legal. And so that was the first time I was experiencing that.
Which is interesting because at the time, right, at 16, it was back then, parents were coming in, and I find it amazing. Now the gyms are opening it up to 12-year-olds, right, for summer training. And I think it's remarkable, and I love it that it's like, get in, have your kids come and experience and try it. And now these gyms are actually trying to promote bringing the kids in earlier to get the habit started a little bit earlier. Yeah.
I mean, as an example, I've definitely seen that before. And I want to say if you're like a teenager, you go for free to Good Life. And I actually think that's a great incentive because it allows people to try to develop those habits from a much younger age. And I definitely have this really strong belief that exercise should be like breakfast. Do you eat breakfast every day? Well, you kind of exercise every day, right? And again, it can look different, but it needs to be part of your routine in some way.
Okay, so we're 16. You get your first access to the gym, and did it shift the way you liked the movement? I mean, you'd been so used to playing soccer and hockey, and this is it's very different. I think people don't always understand the difference between what playing a sport is and then working out in the gym.
Yeah, it is different. Some people will tell you it's a lot more boring. I feel like I hear that a lot from clients, but it's a process. And ultimately the purpose of the gym is really just to make you better in your everyday life. That's what I kind of see it as, right? And it's had different purposes for me personally throughout my life. And, at certain times it was to be more competitive and to beat everyone and to be more, perform better in terms of exercise. But lately it's obviously shifted very much just because, my family lives have shifted and we have a 3-year-old daughter now. And so life always changes when you have kids, right? And so appreciating that. And so now it's a lot more about creating great energy levels throughout the day, being very productive in my day, and just feeling good.
Is that what you say to the clients that are coming in? What is the purpose of the gym?
And the way I really like to frame it, which I find has been very helpful for a lot of people that I've worked with, is what is the intention? Okay. So what do you want to do with your body? Like, what do you want to do with your fitness? Right. And so the exercise program, I fundamentally believe, should reflect what your intention is. And if you want to be, I'm just picking an example here, an Olympic level athlete, right? You want to be like a bobsledder. Well, your training program is going to look really different than the person who just wants to be, let's say, a good mom and be able to play on their hands and knees with their 6-year-old child and not get tired or out of breath, or be able to stand on the ground and stand up and get back down without any issues.
The reality is sometimes you see that there are issues with just a parent being able to get up and down off the floor, or with grandparents who want to be able to get up and down with their grandkids on the floor. And sometimes they don't realize that they lack the mobility or lack the strength to do that until they're put into a position where they're like, wow, my body hasn't moved. I don't have the mobility to do this. And do you get that? Is that people didn't realize what it was that they needed it for?
Yes, exactly. And sometimes it's also a question of realization and not I wouldn't say it's necessarily not being honest with themselves, but we try to help them come to the real fundamental reason why they're exercising. Because once you can understand why they're exercising, trying to keep them, motivated more long term and avoiding this like yo-yo effect that you get in the fitness industry constantly, where it's like, oh, new year, new me. Oh, and then like they drop off
6 weeks later.
Yeah, gym's empty, no one's in the parking lot. And that's a huge, monstrous issue in the fitness industry today that I've been aware of for many, many years, where it's about how many gym memberships can we sell. And I just always think about what that person feels like who's selling those gym memberships and who's selling essentially they know that probably about 1 out of 10 gym memberships that they're selling are actually going to be used. And so our vision for OPEX was to create a gym that essentially doesn't have that. Okay. And I try to be upfront and honest with people where don't sign up here unless you plan on coming, because I will continue to harass you until you come back. And I say that jokingly, but all of my members know that if they don't show up and I don't see them for a couple workouts, like they're getting, it starts with a call, it starts with a text. And then if they don't answer that, it'll start with a standard email, then it'll go to a text, then it'll go to a call. And I swear to God, I'm gonna go like see where they work, because that's how committed I am to making sure that people don't have this inconsistency in their training, because it's the biggest issue with exercise today is the inconsistency with starting and stopping and starting and stop. And, and realistically, I don't care about what type of exercise people do as long as they stick to it, as long as they are committed to making it, a regular habit.
I like that. And I actually get so sad because I get excited in the new year because I do see all these people, and I get that the gym's going to be a lot busier in January and February, and I plan for it, and I go different times when I know it won't be as busy because I've been a regular, for 30 some years. So, but I get sad when I start to see the numbers dwindling. Yeah. And I get sad when I realize with some of the bigger box gyms that it was really just about selling memberships and not fully having the intention of seeing these people through. So that's one way definitely of looking at it. And I like the accountability. And I think accountability is a massive part of where the success lies. You were going to the gym at 16 and playing these sports. I want to get into a little bit of the CrossFit because sure. I'm all over the map a little bit with it. And what it does. So what was because when you talk about you were training to beat the other guy and to be faster and be stronger, right? And sure. So performance-based is really, I think, the mentality that a lot of the CrossFitters have. Correct.
I would definitely say so. And it depends. I would say it depends on the CrossFitter. We personally, like our gym is very, very, very relaxed. I would say we're probably one of the least competitive gyms here in the city, for sure. And I'm okay with that because the reality is that our members don't really need to beat other people, for competitions.
Right. I honestly think, though, if you have the CrossFit mentality, you're going to a CrossFit gym.
If you have if you want to be competitive?
Like if you're a competitive absolutely. CrossFitter, I'm sorry, you're not working out at the norm, like you're at a CrossFit gym. It's the only way I think that actually you excel is to be in that environment, right?
Yes.
So where you're like OPEX isn't meant for correct. CrossFitters, right? But what was it for you that you strived to be in that environment or that you wanted that for yourself?
Yeah. I would say it started with, because the first time I had ever done CrossFit, I was 21 years old. This is a long time ago now. And it was really about the feeling that it gave me compared to regular sports. And that's what I would compare it to. And I think anyone who's done somewhat competitive levels of any sport, they just feel a certain way when you're on the ice or on the field. And it was that feeling that really attracted me, where it's like, I didn't know that an exercise workout could make me feel that way. And I thought and when I'm, thinking about it now I have a lot more awareness around what it means for, lactic threshold and training and, that high burn and sort of that feeling where it's like, oh my God, I almost feel sick to my stomach when I'm doing this exercise. And it was this is back in 2008.
Which is really as CrossFit is starting to build, right?
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
There's an interest around it. It took a while for it to come, to really reach the masses, I think. And then you have things like,
huge.
The CrossFit Games, and it's on ESPN and you see the fittest people in the world. And then you're like, oh, this is what everyone's been talking about.
That's right. Yeah. And it's so funny because I think sometimes people think that a CrossFit gym is going to be like training you for the CrossFit Games, right? But it's like going to a recreational hockey game and expecting that to be the NHL. Like, it's just not the NHL because we were all born a certain way, and and those athletes were born a certain way as well too. And at a certain point, it's like, I feel like it's just a really strong combination between tremendous work ethic, amazing recovery, and also genetic potential. Like those three things, when you combine them really well together, will make those type of athletes where
Are you surprised at what the body is capable of? Because you talked about pushing your max, getting to the point where you thought you were going to be sick, understanding the lactic acid and how the recovery time is near, so it's a scientific aspect too of what the body's capable of.
Yeah, absolutely. And it always does surprise me for sure, because I've done a lot of things with my body that I never thought were possible, that I had as a basic example, when CrossFit was first getting popular, it was like a really big deal to have a clean and jerk that was 225 pounds. It was like a big deal. You were like in the top, let's just say 10% of CrossFitters, and I didn't think I'd ever get there, this like scrawny kid who's like 160 pounds. And then, 5 years later, about 175 pounds and able to do, well over that. And so it's pretty amazing what your body can adapt to given the right stimulus.
Do you think, just even for you or for people in general, how much of it did you come down to fitness and training, and how much it came down to nutrition, what you were eating, and everything else?
Oh, I think about that all the time, because it was a long time ago that I competed. And so I went to the Latin America regionals, and that was for 3 years. And that was, I believe it was 2011, 12, and 13.
You were living in Mexico at the time?
I was. That's a whole nother
we should
story.
Mention, like the chasing a girl down to Mexico and staying, right?
Yeah, that's right. I kind of I wouldn't say I got dragged down there. I definitely went of my own free will, but so I had met my wife in a CrossFit gym, and then I had gone to do this trip around the world for 9 or 10 months. And so we kind of kept in touch, and she visited me a couple times along the way. And then when I got back to Montreal, she was moving to Mexico. And so I followed her there, which was quite the experience. Yeah.
So you're living in Mexico.
Yeah.
You're training, because if you mentioned you were competing at the Latin American, right? So I'm assuming it's because you were in that area to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
And do you find the difference between what's happening in certain parts of the world? I mean, you would have seen that, right? You traveled, but to see what happens in the gyms in Mexico and what happens in the gyms in Ottawa, is there a lot of parallels? Are there different ways that they see things or do things?
Yeah, I would say at that time, it just took way longer. I mean, keep in mind that CrossFit started in the U.S., so by the time it got to Mexico, it came to Canada first, and then it got to Mexico later. So they were about 4 or 5 years, I would say, behind, let's just call it Canadian standards in terms of the industry. So there was like one gym in Mexico City for...
Gosh, you're in Mexico City?
Yeah.
You're not even a...
No, I'm not like by the beach.
Yeah,
like, no.
not even close.
No. So it was a big city, and that was a different experience. And I did really enjoy my time there. I made amazing friendships with, friends that I still kind of keep in touch with now. And
did you know that this is where you were going to go? Like when you were living there, that you saw this vision of being in the health and fitness industry, of creating a business or being part of something like that? Yeah. Did it start there? Where did that business entrepreneurial aspect of what you're going to be doing
come into the picture? Great question. So I still remember now, I was 27 years old, and we were about to come back, and we're coming back. And I think it was about like 8 or 9 months. We knew that like our time in Mexico was done, and we're planning to come back to Canada. And ultimately there's that looming question, like, what am I going to do? And I just woke up one day and I was like, I don't want another desk job. I just don't, like Ottawa's a government town, and it seems like the easiest path, right? Oh, I'm going to get a government job, work for some organization, get this great pension, get this, great pay as well. And I just didn't want to do it. I thought I'd just have a lot of regret, and I had done a lot of desk jobs up to that point in my life, and I just didn't want to do another one. I just wanted to do, and I just came to this realization where it's like, I'm just going to open a gym, and I'm just going to go for it. And if I fail, I fail, and that'll be it. But I just don't want to have any regrets when I'm 65 years old, looking back on my life and being bitter about what could have been.
Who did you see your client being? I mean, you see this fact that you're going to open this gym, but who did you see on the other end of that door?
Yeah, I had absolutely no idea. That's the truth. Looking back at it, I really didn't plan it very well at all. I did very little market research. I should have done way more. I should have done way more. But the reality is that I didn't. I just kind of went 100% in with just passion and giving everything I had and working really hard every day.
So what was the idea then of having the all around, right? Like we talked about that. And I think that's why you felt this was going to be different with OPEX so how does it work then? Because you were talking about you go to a trainer, you go to a nutritionist.
Yes.
How does it all come together with you?
Yeah. So what we do is when someone first walks through the door, we sit down completely for free, and we just sit down and try to get to know them a little bit better. Because if you don't know the person you're trying to help, then how are you really supposed to help them, right? Like I don't even know if this person is actually a good fit for our gym or not. So we do a free consultation for anyone who's interested in just, even just picking up a couple of like free fitness tips that they can apply on their own. All the better, whether they work with us or not, that's completely up to them. We definitely don't do any kind of like hard sell approach or lock them into a tiny room and don't let them out. So what we do is if they're interested in trying it out, we always only sell 1 month memberships to start. And the reason for that is consistency. Show me you can be consistent for a month and show me you actually really want to do this. And then you can have, the choice to sign up for a longer term membership. But we don't want anyone in our gym unless they're really committed to making a change, and unless they're really committed to trying to do things a little bit differently. And so I try to be very, upfront and honest with people right from the get-go.
So they're walking in, they have a month to try.
Yes.
Or I like that because usually there's the pressure, right?
I know. Sign up for a year. It's cheaper.
Yeah. So, and what are you able to in that time do? Because are you starting immediately onto the nutrition, onto the plan, how does it all get going right away?
So the first thing we do is we do an assessment, and it's actually a really in-depth 3-hour assessment with each individual who walks through our doors. And the purpose of that assessment is to get a snapshot of where you are right now in terms of health and fitness.
3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So you're not running in, signing up.
No, it's not like, go do this thing. Just
so 3 hours. So people need to mentally prepare for that first time. Okay. So what, in a 3-hour assessment, what should people be able to realize about themselves?
Yes. So what they're going to get an idea of, we try to have a great conversation for that first hour, get to really understand what their goals are and why they're important.
Are you asking them why it hasn't happened yet? Like, are you asking them because are you having 3 Cokes a day, or are you skipping meals and then only eating a big, large one? Are you finding out the patterns that way too?
This podcast is brought to you by Extension Marketing. They are a new breed of marketing agency that acts as your virtual marketing department, designing and implementing cost-effective marketing strategies that will grow your business. I can speak to this personally, as I've been using the Extension Marketing team to help me launch and grow my business. Founder Pat Whalen has been a lifesaver for me, a genuine coach guiding me along the way into uncharted territory. Tell them you're a friend of the show and receive a free 1-hour consultation. Check them out at extensionmarketing.com.
Yes, absolutely. Because, and I think I think for anyone who's been in fitness for a long time, one of the major things, and this was a huge light bulb moment for me like a couple years ago, where it was like, it's behaviors. If you can understand people's behaviors and why they're doing certain things, then that will allow you to have a much better chance of potentially changing those behaviors, right? People have this automatic mind, right? You don't think about making breakfast in the morning, you just do it. You just like pull something out of the fridge, you like cut it up, you do whatever you need to in order to get your meal ready. You go into your, we call it that automatic mind. But people don't necessarily think about what they're doing, right? It's just sort of habit. A lot of times people don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They're just doing it because it's what they've done for the last however many years. And so by asking them, you actually get them to think about, well, wait a second, why am I eating carbs first thing in the morning when I'm exercising later on in the evening, for example, right? That's just like the small detail, but it kind of just gives you an idea of, starting to ask questions around what your habits or what your behaviors are.
So you go through habits, behaviors, and then and in the assessment, what's the physical aspects that you're trying to understand about a person?
Yes. And so the major things that we do a work capacity test, which is sort of so we develop a test specific. We have standard tests, but we have specific tests that are based on their goals. So for example, if you tell me that you want to run a 5K in, under 20 minutes as an example, right? Then I want to see what your 5K is right now, right? Because how am I going to know if it actually improved in, let's say, a month or two from now, unless I have sort of like a baseline as to what it is. So we believe in that sort of testing and then retesting principle.
Are you getting someone that says, I want to run my first 5K and I just want to be able to start and actually cross the finish line?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes, and that's okay too, you know, you have to, and that's another part of it where you want to sort of manage what realistic expectations are for each of those people. If you've never run a 5K before and the most you've ever run is like, I don't know, 200 meters, then we have a lot of work to do, and maybe testing that 5K isn't really applicable right now, but it will be in the future when you sort of test that first one and then retest it. And then, you know, if that's really what's important to you, right? And then the second and third thing we do is we do a movement analysis to find out what your left to right side imbalances are, because everyone comes in with different baggage, right? You know, you might have a bad knee or a shoulder, and we just want to test what those range of motions are in those particular joints to kind of see, should I not be prescribing, I don't know, as example, like push-ups, because whenever you do upper body pushing, your shoulder hurts, for example. And so it gives us a great idea as to like where you're at right now in terms of that snapshot. And we also do a physical assessment. So we break up your body into 5 different parts, and we put you on a scale of 0 to 5 to kind of figure out where you're a little bit weaker and where you're a little bit stronger, because that gives us a great idea of, you know, if we're trying to build a balanced individual, what do we need to prioritize?
Are people surprised by how their bodies are imbalanced?
Yeah.
You know, like you think like, okay, I'm standing up straight and everything's working, but there usually is a dominant side.
Always, almost always. I really a handful of cases that I've worked with in the last 12 years where you can say that their left to right side, you know, discrepancy is like, let's just call it negligible.
Also, people don't realize we were parts of the body where they haven't used.
Yeah.
Right. Like like even sitting and then standing up, right? People don't realize that sometimes they'll push off of the armrest to get themselves up, right? They don't realize what they're not using to be able to do basic movement.
Yeah. It's a great party trick. Have you ever been at a party?
No, okay, what am I doing? What's my party trick?
You just ask someone to do, you know, a couple of lunges, and you see if they can do either a split squat or a lunge, and you see if they can do like 10 in a row, for example. And you would be and I'm talking a full lunge where you're in a fully, standing position, your knee comes down, touches the ground, and then comes back up, and you just do it in a very controlled environment because we don't want anyone smashing their knees on the ground. But you do it safely, and you'd be absolutely surprised how many people cannot do that. And it's a very simple movement, but when it comes to, like we talked about that difference between, let's say, single leg and double leg activities from 0 to 5, when you think about how strong someone is on one leg, it's very different, and you realize how much someone might be compensating through the other leg. Okay,
so we're going through this assessment.
Yes.
So you've done right, left imbalance, mobility to see where injuries are.
Correct.
What other things are you looking for?
I just want to see, again, where, like you mentioned that whole part about behaviors. And so that's a big part to kind of understand what stopped them from being successful in the past. Why is this going to be any different? When are you most likely to drop off? Is it when work gets really busy? Because maybe you're an accountant, as an example, right? Tax season comes up. Oh, have you noticed you always stop exercising whenever tax season comes up because you're so busy at the office, you don't have time to, and all of a sudden it kind of falls on the back burner, and then you lose that consistency piece. So understanding those things and understanding where their nutrition is at, I think is really important. I heard the podcast that you had with Stephanie K, right? And I thought that was great. That was really just really good pieces in terms of... And
she had great information.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
And a lot of people... And it's funny because oftentimes people will ask me if I see them or they're out, they're like, oh, who was it last week kind of thing. And I was like, I really liked Stephanie's... I was like, okay, well, I had Stephanie on. She was a nutritionist. I loved her start to finish of what the real food, what a real food is, and how we view it as processed, and the stages that a food goes through from so as soon as it's no longer just one food, like the tomato, right? Yes. And the tomato became the sun-dried tomato.
That's right.
It was like going through the process of how it ends up as ketchup. I love to kind of understanding that, because as much as you think or how to read labels, or you're looking, she gave us the right information. And so are you able to do that because you're doing all of those steps with your clients that then becomes we're doing these workouts to accomplish this goal. This is how it has to change at home.
Absolutely.
And are you doing the texting and the emails and everything else to say, what did you eat for dinner kind of thing?
That's right. It depends the individual, but sometimes one of the really effective tools that I found can be beneficial is getting them to send you so we have software that we use where they get their training programs, they get those lifestyle pieces delivered to them. So they have to physically check those things off day to day through an app, which is a great way of really connecting the coach and client so that it, number one, keeps them accountable, but it also makes sure that they're doing all these things that you sort of want to build them into, these habits that you want to build them into over time. So as an example, one of them could be like, take 3 times today, I want you to sort of just like take a really deep breath in and exhale really slowly and just take 5 breaths, but do that 3 times, morning, noon, and night, right? And so as you sort of do that right before you're about to eat, kind of just really slows you down and sort of activates that, that parasympathetic state. So you're sort of ready to, digest that food.
Oh, do you do that? Do you do that before you eat?
Yeah, it's a great. I don't know
Okay, so what is this little trick? No, okay. So what is it?
It's really simple. Some people will kind of think of it more as like meditation, but it's not really meditation. It's just sort of trying to relax your body before you're about to consume any kind of like food. So everyone's really busy today. We're way more stressed than we should be, and I think everyone can sort of accept that as being generally the norm for most people. But one way to sort of just try to relax yourself a little bit before a meal is just take a second. You always want to sit whenever you're about to eat. So you should never be standing and eating on the go as much as possible. I say that because I have kids and I'm like, that's not possible. Anyway, as much as realistically possible, right? And so you want to sit down and you want to take anywhere between like 5 to 10 breaths. You want to like suck in your air really slowly over like 3 breaths and then exhale over like 6 or like a 3 to 6
So like
second.
double it. So,
yes.
So
exhale slower than you inhale, right? And just take a second to just like relax a little bit. And that can drastically just change, sort of the feeling that you have in your body so that you can not only absorb that food to a great degree, but digest it, a little bit more fully. And I always say, it doesn't really matter what you consume as much as how you digest that food, right? If, as an example, like you eat some food, you eat it really fast, you're standing up, you're on the go. Often that, even though it's really good quality food, that can still cause, distension, gas or bloating, which means you're not actually absorbing as much of that food as you should, especially not if you're, potentially seeing it in your stool, not to get too descriptive or anything. But those are all things you kind of want to think about as to like how how do you personally react to that food?
It's interesting because you talk about someone who's eating healthy but on the go and, grabbing that salad or that salad with the chicken and the protein and they've got the combinations that they're supposed to, but they're eating it standing up on the go as opposed to and not allowing it to digest properly.
Yes.
Whereas you take the person who sat down, allowed a relaxation of the body, the digestive process is able to happen. And so you're keeping the good nutrients more so than not digesting them. I never thought about that, just the simple of how I'm eating.
Yes. And we call that like, it's one of the first things we touch because we call it sort of like general food hygiene. Like you wash your hands before you're about to eat. Well, this is something that you sort of want to implement into that same practice. And another thing that I see as being really, really overlooked is just the idea of chewing your food. And again, it's not a sexy approach. You can't sell it. You can't package it. But just the idea of chewing your food, because digestion starts in your mouth. As soon as you put food into your mouth, if you don't mix saliva really, really well with that food, again, you're starting, from a deficit. You're not going to digest that food really well. And so you want to set yourself up for to be in a place where you can really, accept that food and digest it.
Have you ever had a client just say those 2 little basic changes?
Yeah.
Those actually work.
Yeah.
Those are very basic. It doesn't take talent.
It doesn't.
Or those are easier things to change.
Yes. And I'm a really firm believer, and it's funny, when I think about when I first started coaching, I give my clients 10 things to do, do this and this and this and this and this. And you do that enough times and you realize that it's the worst approach because I mean, it might work for like 1 out of 10 people who's like, type A personality and they do everything. But what you want to do, and a much more successful approach that I found, is just like a little breadcrumb approach. They're like a little duck and they're following the breadcrumbs, and you just give them just a little something to change every time, because that's what makes it manageable. And when it's manageable, they can be consistent, and then they can allow it to really become part of their routine, which is the goal, really.
Really interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So you go through this, you were talking about the app, because I was going through like the checklist, right? This is how we got onto that conversation.
Sure.
So they're having to be, so the accountability aspect comes in
through the app. Yes. And we can see.
Can you see if they're just cheating and just going, oh, I haven't filled this out in a day, I'm just going to check. Yeah. How can you monitor that?
Yes, that's a great question again. And so I can see if they're checking it yes or no. They could be lying about it. We tend to see that when we retest all of our parameters, right? So we have different testing protocols in terms of like, okay, I want to see if your core stability has improved this month, as an example. So as a general rule, we'll usually retest people every 3 to maybe 8 weeks, depending on, the training age of the person. Because if, anyone who's really well trained will take much longer to actually see improvement, right? It's the beauty of kind of starting training for the first time in your life for those first couple years. It's like the glory days where it's like, oh, I'm lifting more weight automatically, right? And then it slows over time. And so you have to kind of give your body a bit more time to adapt because your central nervous system is so much more developed, et cetera. And so we can kind of see, but in order to kind of keep that accountability, when we retest them, we'll get a great idea if they're actually cheating the system or not, because they usually won't improve at all. And that's
so their workouts are in the app.
Yes.
The food is in the app.
Correct.
The taking
Lifestyle.
deep breaths before you eat, or chewing, or sleeping, like that's all part of it.
Yes, and it's there because it's mostly for the accountability factor, right? If I just say, oh, hey, don't forget to chew your food. But if you get an email every single day, and then you get an email every single day you miss your workout, that is more likely to make you, oh yeah, I got to fill this out. And then we get notified, as coaches, we get notified when you don't fill out when you don't fill out the app, we know. And so that kind of gives us, okay, we got to escalate a little bit. First, we send you a message through True Coach. And then if that doesn't work, then we send you a text, and then we'll call you, and then we'll kind of figure out what's going on. And so it allows us to really dig a lot deeper with each client. And that is the biggest thing that I found was missing in fitness, is that you can do this great workout. It might be too hard. It might be too easy for you. But the problem is, who's there to really make sure you're sleeping enough in order to recover from that workout? Like no one, right? Like everyone knows sleep is important, but somehow it's always about trying to like take this, this supplement that's going to make you better. But the reality is, taking a supplement instead of sleeping more is like stepping over $100 bill and picking up a quarter. What's the point? Like, yeah, maybe that supplement is making you a tiny bit better, but why would you step over the $100 bill when you can get so much more out of potentially trying to just change your habit and recovering way better?
I hope people see the sleep thing. Like, do I want the quarter or do I want the $100 bill?
Exactly, right? Sure. I mean, yeah, pick up the quarter, but maybe you should only pick up the quarter once your sleep is all in alignment. You have generally great food hygiene, your nutrition is on point, you generally have quite low stress in your life, and you're sort of managing that very well. Then go pick up the quarter. Sure, then let's throw in, a potential creatine supplement that, will make you a little bit stronger because you want to increase your back squat by 10 pounds. I'm all for it, but just make sure you're doing things in the right order. Yeah. And
you're doing that by laying little breadcrumbs.
Yes, because that's generally how I have had the most success over, years and years.
If it's too overwhelming, people just sign off. I do appreciate that you said, and I think for people who might be struggling, is if you're new to it and you're just starting out, you will see results much quicker because your body isn't accustomed to it. And so it's going, oh, okay, we're going to burn off these calories, or I'm going to start to get stronger. But I think sometimes you get very frustrated people who have been living healthy lifestyles and who have been going to the gym and who are like, why have I plateaued?
Yes.
Like, what am I doing wrong? Because it used to work. All of this stuff used to work for me, and now it's not. And then they get
the motivation starts to lack, and then they're not seeing the results, and that's when you get into kind of the spiraling out of it, because they see the effort that they're putting in and they're never seeing results. And I'm sure you get people that come to you at that point, kind of going, I don't know what's going on.
The majority of people, in fact, and I think one of the things that I always think about, okay, who's the client avatar that we normally get in our gym? And a lot of them are people that have tried many other things, typically. So they've tried the Good Life, they tried the Movati, they've tried the big box gyms. Sometimes they've tried some kind of group fitness aspect, and maybe that, didn't work for them for some reason. And then we'll get someone, so they're usually people that are frustrated with fitness. They're usually kind of a little bit upset because they feel like they deserve better results because they've had success in the past, but then they're having a hard time recreating those same, accomplishments or moments.
Results.
Results.
Do you accept that it could be the training, but it's also the body is used to the food that's coming in? It's difficult because it gets to a point where it's like the 80-20 rule.
Yes.
And 80% of it's coming from the sleep, the food,
exactly.
what you're eating. And 20% is coming with how different or how you change up your workouts.
Yeah. I'd say just the nutrition aspect is huge. I always kind of categorize as okay, first it's sleep, then nutrition, and then exercise is just that gravy on the top. You can arguably, if you just move in your regular day and you move, not necessarily with vigorous intensity, but you move somewhat throughout the day, you could, live a pretty good life, a pretty good healthy life by just eating really well and sleeping, with a lot, let's just say a lot, in order to really recover well. We design training programs, and so if it was a lie, I would be the first one to tell you that. But the lifestyle matters more than the exercise. And again, most trainers will not tell, I don't know if they'll necessarily tell you that or focus on it, but that's the truth. That's what people need to know. But sometimes I feel in our, in our society, it's just all about shredded abs and trying to necessarily look as good as possible. But then you got to take a second to actually think about, what your goal is. Is it truly aesthetics? In which case you're willing to sacrifice health and longevity? Because those are two, again, different buckets that you have to sort of understand, right?
Explain that, because I don't think people get that, because they want to look like they want to have the aesthetics.
That's right.
Or that six pack, and that comes at a very different lifestyle or,
correct,
as you mentioned, longevity of having that over something else.
Yeah. And so as an example, if you're trying to look as good as possible and you think about who's the most competitive at this, right? Who does this generally the best? Well, you think about physique models, right? Or, professional bodybuilders. They'll definitely be the ones that look the best, right? They kind of have the biggest muscles, the least amount of body fat, etc. But you have to also understand that comes at a price, and it comes at, the price of your adrenals and then, and burning a tremendous amount of cortisol and adrenaline, et cetera, and basically wearing out your body faster than it's meant to, right? Because you have to go through a tremendous amount of starvation in order to get to that point. So you really have to want that physique, number one. But number two, just because you look really good, it doesn't mean you're going to live a long and prosperous life, because those look completely different in terms of the training programs that are built into each one and the nutritional habits that are built into each one.
Mm-hmm. What for you would be the ideal, perfect client longevity health that you see that you've made the biggest impact on somebody?
Yes, I would say it's definitely probably related to longevity. And it's probably because I can sympathize with that as well too, because ultimately that's my goal is that I think about what I want to be able to do when I'm 80, and what that looks like. And if what I'm doing today is not going to lead me to being able to be active when I'm 80, then that's a problem. I really shouldn't be doing that ultimately, right? And so you want to think about that, right? Because you can be 80 years old and be stuck in a bed and be, bedridden and not be able to move very much, but ultimately I can't imagine anyone really wanting that outcome, right? So you have to think about, okay, what do I want to be able to do when I'm 80, and what kind of habits do I want to implement right now so that I can keep these for a very long time that will allow me to still be active when I'm 80. I say 80.
No, and I love that. But I love that because if you're 30, you need to be thinking that.
Yeah.
But also if you're 70, you can actually still be thinking that.
Absolutely.
And so you can kind of go, well, for the first 70 years, I might not have allowed that. Can there be a shift to be able to feel better at 80 than they did at 70?
Exactly. And that's the whole goal is we're all trying to resist entropy, right? I mean, let's just say you're past, teenage years where you're growing and you can eat whatever the hell you want and get away with it. Although that ultimately always catches up to that person regardless, but we're all trying to resist that entropy, right? We're all gonna die one day, right? The only thing you can do with, your lifestyle, with your health, and with new nutrition is try to delay it as much as possible, right? That's the only, you can either speed it up and get there a lot faster to the end of your life, or you can try to extend it. And I think that everyone likes the idea of living long and prosper. Oh yeah, it's a great idea. I want to live long. Sure, everyone wants to live long. But ultimately, are you going to be able to change your behaviors now so that you can actually get there when you're 80 or 90 or 100?
Have you had a person walk in and go, I think you just gave me back 20 years?
Yeah, I have. And it's a great feeling. And it's always, I've heard this from many clients, but when they say, oh, I'm fitter now than when I was 5 years ago, right? And that's always, it's a great feeling because that's the reason why I got into this, business, is because what I realized about myself is that I enjoy, just building relationships with individuals, getting them to realize things they didn't otherwise know, and trying to help them change their life. But ultimately, one of the biggest principles we have at OPEX is empowerment. And that's when we truly believe in that in our core, where we want to inspire people to live an empowered life, but they have to make that decision. And I realized that many years ago, where I can't be the one who makes them exercise. They can't exercise because of me. They have to want to exercise for themselves and for their own long life. Because if they don't do it, then that's inauthentic and their motivation will inherently dwindle. And as an example, if I was doing personal training with a client, okay, and I have nothing against personal training, let me just start by saying that. But one of the flaws with personal training is that it's a dependent relationship. Because if, let's say I'm personal training you, what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? You don't even know what weight you're lifting. You don't know what exercises to do. You just follow along and you do your thing. What I'm trying to create at OPEX is I'm trying to create a model that allows people to take control of their own fitness so that one day they don't need me anymore. They know exactly how much water they should drink. They know exactly how much they should be sleeping. They know exactly how they should be eating for them. And they can continue to do that for the next 35, 40 years. And they can die when they're 95 and live a great life. And that's ultimately what our goal is in the long run.
So that's an interesting business model that at the end of the day, you'd like to eventually see them not using your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Come in, let me help, yeah. And, and that there's a life cycle.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe if I told a lot of business entrepreneurs that, they'd be like, you're crazy. Why are you trying to get rid of your clients? And I'm not trying to get rid of them, but I want them, and it's a long process where they can learn as much as they can from me, because we have a tremendous amount of expertise and we have a lot, I think, that they can pull from us. But ultimately, we want them to never need us again, right? They should be it's your own body. Why shouldn't you be able to know exactly what exercises you need to do, where you're a little bit weaker, what your own personal body mechanics are, where your discrepancies are, and how you react the best to those things? You should be able to take control of those things.
It's an interesting concept for sure.
Yeah.
So when you have people coming in, then you're having lots of different age groups, either people that are looking, as you mentioned, I want to run the 5K faster. I want to be able to lose the weight. I'm looking at aesthetics. I want to be able to be 80 and feel like I'm the best ever.
Yeah.
Where are you? What is the gym like? How have you guys been able to establish this? Because it's you guys. I mean, I used to think I knew a lot of, who is who and we're in the city, but where are you guys?
So we're right at the corner of Prince of Wales and Hunt Club. So we're in Nepean. And so we're basically a block away from there. And it's sort of essentially just trying to create awareness around what we do. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that because it's a very new model, people don't know about what OPEX stands for, what it represents. Because I do believe fundamentally it's different.
Mm-hmm. Can people work out with you and then know that they have this checklist and they have all these things, and then still be able to do workouts and stuff elsewhere? You know, like there's almost, as you mentioned, you want to be able to create it so that they're capable of doing this on their own.
Absolutely. And so one of the best things is that on the through the app, you can actually upload your own videos, you can upload pictures, and we can give you feedback through that app as well too. So I have some clients that will come into the gym, for example. So whenever you come into the gym, I should definitely mention that we're not babysitting you through personal training, but you're definitely always supervised. So we're telling you how to do the movements, we're correcting your form, we're making sure, you know, so there's always someone on the floor while you're doing your exercises, but you're going through those things, you know, so to speak, on your own. But there's still a community of other people who are sort of like supporting each other as well too. Yeah.
So best place is OPEX Ottawa.
Yes, on Instagram, OPEX Ottawa. You can like us on Facebook as well too, OPEX Ottawa. And yeah. So
happy, you know, at 27 that you decided not to do the desk job. Like, do you feel fulfilled that you feel at the end of the day there's lives that have been changed?
Every day, and I work a tremendous amount more than I would work at a desk job. You know, I probably work over 70 hours a week, but you know what? There are hours that I enjoy that I wouldn't give anything for. And ultimately I drive home and I smile because I'm proud of what I've done.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And then you got to go check that app.
Yeah.
Did I cross off my own my own checklist? Do you find that though, like, because you're so concerned, like everything's about other people, to fit it in for yourself, for your family?
Yes. Like in terms of my own personal
fitness?
fitness?
I mean, I hear from a lot of people, they're in the gym all day, they're doing other, that they eventually fall behind.
Absolutely.
And that's the challenge.
That is the challenge. And that's why I always work out first thing in the morning. It's usually 5:30. But I love it. I mean, again, for me, it's like breakfast. Yeah. It's part of my habits. It's part of my routine. Yeah.
That's an early one to get, but you got to get it in, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people too, you want to be able to work with people who are setting, you know, who are a living example,
yes.
You know, are leading that way, that they're doing what they're preaching.
Yes.
I'm like, don't, if you have a trainer that's doing all this stuff and you can tell that
they're not
practicing what they preach, I go, it's not the right motivator. I go with someone that you know is motivating themselves as well to be able to be better for you.
Absolutely.
And that's always been a pretty good key. Jonathon, I really appreciate you coming in. People can find more information, opexottawa.ca.
.com.
It's an OPEX, so OPEX Ottawa.com if you're looking for more information. And I like to, you know, there's lots of great little tips there. I'm going to try the whole breathing before I eat, for sure. I'm not sure I'll be able to sit down all the time. I find I eat standing up all the time. But definitely a couple of like, you know, great tidbits. And I really like the $100 bill to the quarter. Yeah. I'm like, why are you stepping over things? A $100 bill to pick up the quarter when you're doing that. Really good things for people to think about. Sure. So there you have it. That's another episode of Living Your Life with Lianne Laing. As always, please like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you think. Any suggestions. It's always great to be able to see the podcast grow, but we need you guys to be able to help do that. So really appreciate the support in helping Living Your Life be able to do that. And I know you're listening right now, but if you are listening to other things, I have mentioned Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, but also I just found out that I'm actually on iHeart as well, iHeartRadio. So if you're suggesting it to people and people are asking where you can find it, we have been added to that playlist as well. Have a great day, everyone.